Carbon just dropped their new TruFoam Waves paddles, the follow-up to January's Genesis line. On paper, they're marketed as the more powerful option, but after testing them, I'd say they're more similar than different. That said, there are a few things about the Waves that make me reach for them over the Genesis, but does that mean I'd actually choose them over other top foam paddles out there right now? That's the real question. Hey, this is Brandon with Pickleball Effect. Today I'm breaking down Carbon's new TruFoam Waves paddles, how they stack up against the Genesis line, and how they compare to the rest of the growing foam market. When Carbon launched the Genesis line back in January, I absolutely loved it. It was the first foam paddle that actually had some life to it, and for over 6 months, it stood alone as the best foam option in the space, which is just an eternity in the pickleball world. Fast forward to now, however, and the foam market looks completely different. We've got options from $100 to $333, which puts Carbon's $280 price tag and performance under a lot more scrutiny. Quick note here before we dive in, Carbon sent me these paddles to test, but this review wasn't guaranteed or sponsored. All thoughts are my own. If you do find this review helpful and want to grab a Waves or any of the paddles that I talk about today, you can support the channel by using code PBEffect at purchase or click on the links in the description. Okay, so first up, let's compare the Waves to the Genesis line. We'll look at tech, then offensive ability and control, and finally forgiveness and maneuverability. After that, I'll wrap up with how the Waves stack up against the rest of today's foam market. So the Waves technology is built on the same 14mm foam foundation as the Genesis, but with a different cutout pattern than the original one had. So Carbon designs these cutouts to change how the paddle flexes to get the performance they want. As you can see in the x-rays of these paddles, that the Genesis line has larger voids around the perimeter surrounding a block of circular cutouts. With the Waves, that's been replaced by a symmetrical wave pattern. Then they also changed the facing layup. The Waves has a full sheet of fiberglass that spans the entire face between 4 layers of carbon fiber, where the Genesis line has multiple carbon fiber layers with a small square patch of fiberglass that's covering the sweet spot at the bottom of that layup. So Carbon is the only brand making foam paddles with these cutout designs. The cutouts add life to the paddle, but after hitting a variety of other foam builds that have come out now, I've started to notice that there are some limitations with this approach. These cutouts are very sweet spot focused, meaning the flex pattern works for you when you strike the center of the paddle, but as soon as you leave that strike zone, you see a drop in performance quicker than other foam paddles that don't do this cutout design. And in the case of the Waves, this drop in performance manifests itself most near the top of the paddle where it has some dead zones. Though when you do hit it in the right spot, it rewards you with more ball action and can generate dippy, precise shots that not every paddle can produce. So the nature of this tech rewards better players who can find the right spot more often and isn't ideal for players looking for more margins. So that's the tech and my thoughts on it. Let's move on to performance of the Waves versus the Genesis. Carbon is marketing the Waves as their power paddle, with the Genesis positioned as more of an all-court option. But in practice, I didn't find the difference in firepower to be that dramatic. The Waves does give you a little extra juice on drives and full swings, but the pop levels feel about the same. So on quick hand exchanges at the net, counters, and short volleys, I just didn't notice any more action there compared to the Genesis, at least speed-wise. I was expecting a bigger jump in power between the two lines, but that never really showed up for me. The Waves felt slightly more aggressive than the Genesis, but that was about it. They let you put a little more pressure on drives, and they give you a small boost when finishing high balls at the net, but that pop just really wasn't any hotter. So control stayed very manageable, and in fact, I'd say I'd actually had better control with the Waves. The updated core design, along with the new face layup, seemed to eliminate that occasional unpredictable spring that I sometimes notice with the Genesis. Offensively, the paddle has this unique, really good shot-making ability. I could attack at the net with precision and spin better than many paddles, but I had to hit it clean to make that happen. If I caught the ball too high on the face, then I just didn't get the same action as I was with the sweet spot, and the same thing with the sides. As soon as you go outside the sides, although there's enough forgiveness on the sides to keep the ball alive, you just don't get that same spin and precision as you do with catching the very center of the paddle. Both lines have a softer, denser, foamy impact feel that I really like. It's a pleasant feel that isn't overly soft and still gives you enough feedback to stay connected in the soft game, with the Waves adding just a touch more feedback on impact compared to the Genesis. Bottom line, I still put the Waves in the aggressive all-court category, same as the Genesis line. They sit in that lower power category tier for power and about average all-court pop, but that combined firepower just wasn't enough for me to call them a true power paddle. While that's not what I was expecting, it's not exactly a bad thing either. The foam power category is getting filled up quickly while everyone seems to be ignoring the all-court category, so there'll be an attraction to these for players who don't want or don't need a big power paddle. When it comes to forgiveness, the Waves are limited, like it was with the Genesis line, but this limitation shows up a bit differently than before. Thanks to the higher twist weight metrics of the Waves, they actually feel more forgiving from side to side compared to the Genesis, but the Waves are weaker near the top of the paddle. If you tend to miss shots near the tip more than the sides, then you're not going to like these. The good news is that you can improve the top sweet spot with some added weight on the upper corners, which noticeably boosts the overall playability of the paddles, though it's still not ideal and is a big drawback to the series. This weight adjustment is more practical on the TFW 2 and 4 since they have lower swing weights than the TFW 1 and 3, because the weight added to the top corners has a bigger effect on swing weight than in other areas. Maneuverability out of the box feels almost identical to the Genesis line, with the TFW 1, 2, and 3 leaning a touch on the heavier side, and then the hybrid TFW 4 sitting on the average for their respective shapes. There's nothing wrong with their maneuverability out of the box, and they would be good there if the sweet spots were better near the tip, but because you need to add weight higher on the face to strengthen the sweet spots here, they just get pushed to the heavy side. For me, the standout shapes in the Wave series are the hybrid TFW 4 and the wide body TFW 2, since you can customize them to improve that sweet spot near the top without them getting overly sluggish, which is more challenging with the elongated shape options. In summary, the Waves versus the Genesis gives you a small bump in drive power, a higher ceiling and shot making ability, a bump in control, and a feel that's very similar to the Genesis line. For me, that's enough to choose the Waves over the Genesis. And if you're willing to tinker with the weight to improve the sweet spot, you can get a pretty strong all-court setup here, but you do give up maneuverability and you don't have the best forgiveness, particularly near the top. So that's how the Waves stack up against the Genesis, but how do they fit into the rest of the foam market? The closest competitor in performance in my eyes is the Honolulu NF series. It has a touch more pop and it's noticeably more forgiving near the tip of the paddle. Plus at $176 after code, it comes in at a much lower price point. Performance and value here go to the NF, but the Waves have better shot making abilities if you can consistently find that sweet spot. Carbon does bring stronger branding, a better warranty, and a 30-day return policy that Honolulu doesn't have, which makes it easier to test drive the paddle before committing and may sway some people to go that route instead. However, if you want an elongated shape, I would just recommend the Honolulu J6 NF every time, though there is a case for the hybrid or wide body Waves for higher level players for its shot making prowess. When you compare the Waves to other recent foam launches like the Selkirk Boomstick, Bread and Butter Loco, Rhombus Quanta, or the Body Helix Flick F1, the Waves aren't as powerful and in many cases not as maneuverable or forgiving. While the Waves is being marketed as a max power option, that's not what it is and doesn't compete in that category with these paddles. But if you're not looking for a big power paddle with easy pop, then the Waves can join that conversation. You can definitely swing a little bit easier and through the ball more than those others where you have to shorten the swing because they're so powerful. Ultimately though, as the all-court category continues to fill in with more foam options, I think the Waves' limitations with the sweet spot and maneuverability are going to hold it back, even though its shot making ability is very good at times. So there you have it. Thanks for watching and I hope it helped. Feel free to ask me any questions in the comments. I'm happy to dive deeper where needed.